Shabbos Parshas Chukas, Afshin Mem Hey, that we're going to learn an excerpt of 1985. And this Sicha, the Rebbe connects Chukas with Yud Beis Tammuz, and he's emphasizing the connection between the name of the Parsha and Yud Beis Tammuz, and how this applies to our Avodah and Simcha and so on. So we're gonna be skipping around a little bit, perhaps. Let's go to the bottom of the page, 2 paragraphs in the bottom. The Parshas Chukas, in the Parsha called Chukas, Yeshnam Ribu Yinyonim. There are many topics, many ideas, many concepts. Omnam, yet, L'choil L'roish Yesh L'vayres Ha'ira. First and foremost, one needs to explain the lesson Shalamaiden Mitoichen Klolos HaParsha, that one derives from the content of the Parsha in general. And what is the content, where, how do we see what the content of the Parshas in general? The way it comes expressed in the name of the Parsha, which is Parshas Chukas. Especially according to what the Rebbe spoke earlier in that Fabrengen of that Shabbos, that the redemption of the Frierdiker Rebbe being released from prison, the 12th of Tammuz, 1927, was not just something that was his own personal redemption. He himself was released from imprisonment in 1927, but like he always says, that this is something that applies to every single Yid, not just every single Yid, but also Gam Yehudi Asher B'Shem Yisrael Yichuna. The previous Rebbe goes through in a letter and says that this celebration of Yud Beis Tammuz applies to Yidden that love Torah and Yidden that are involved in mitzvahs, and even someone that is only called by the name Yisrael, they are also, for them, this applies. And therefore, Yesh limtzoi hayra hamuvenes v'shayeches legam elov. A person, we need to find a lesson from the Parsha that is applicable also to someone that is only b'shem Yisrael Yichuna, only known by the name Jew. Since a person that's only known by the name Jew is not yet applicable by him to derive the lesson from the specific and details of the Parsha of Chukas. We need to begin with the lesson that we derive from the name of the Torah portion, something that's able to be explained also to a Yid that is only called by the name Yisrael. Now the Rebbe says, obviously that doesn't mean that we should stop there. Move on v'gam pashut, it's understood and it's obvious, shetzrichim lachinoy lachshira lamatzav sheyeroi v'shayich lelimudin yonim nailim yosef. One needs to prepare that person to a situation where he will be worthy and ready and able to learn higher and greater things. But on the other hand, one should not wait until the person reaches such a state. In the meantime, time is passing. Like the famous expression, and it's a loss that does not return. There are different types of lost objects, lost things. There are certain type of things where if you lose it, you can return it to its owner. Then there's a loss that it's impossible to return it. It's called, one of those losses is a loss of time. There's no way you can return to someone a waste of time. Therefore, since we don't want to lose any time when it comes to this person, we don't wait until he's able to learn more involved and more in-depth matters of the Parsha. Therefore, we need to begin immediately. with those matters that it's applicable to him also in his present situation. And in our case, deriving a lesson from the name of the Parsha, Chukas, which is Chukas, as we will explain as we go on what the lesson is. Apirish the Chukasu, the meaning of Chukas is Inyan Shalamayla Metam Vadas, a matter that's beyond reason and understanding. That's what the meaning of Chukas is. Chukas is something that is not understood, something that is not grasped. As Rashi brings down, and as the expression the Gemara says, Chukah chakakti gzeira gazarti, I have decreed a decree, I've made a law, I've made a statute, and that's it. There's no argument about it, there's no discussion about it. It's a decree before me. You don't even have any permission to think about it, meaning you just have to do it b'kabbalas. Then the Rebbe says as follows: there are exceptions, and some people, the laws of the Torah, all of them are things that are in general, things that even the most mysterious are things that they understood, that they are able to understand. Matzinu amnam yechidis gula, we do find special people, unique people, she'etzlam bo inyanim shel chukah ba'ofen shel havana v'asagah, that by them matters of a chukah came in a way that's understood and it's comprehended. Kedibri Chazal, like Chazal said, Amar Shloim Melech said, I'll call Eila Madati. And all of these, meaning the entire Torah, I was able to understand. Parshas shel Parah Aduma chakarti v'sha'alti v'shpashti. When it came to the Torah portion of the Parah Aduma, I have investigated, I asked, I searched. Amarti, I said, Ech kamav yirchayka many, I will be wise, but it was distant from me. Zem muva, from this is understood. Shesharin yani chukim, other matters in the Torah that are called a decree, a law without understanding. Milvad paraduma, except paraduma. Bo etzloi ba'ofen shel havana v'asagah came by Shlomo Melech down that he could comprehend it, he could grasp. Not only that, when it came to Parah Aduma, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, to you I'm going to reveal the reason of the Parah Aduma, but to someone else it's going to be a chayk, meaning super rational. So regardless, we find that there are exceptional cases of people that do understand Chukim, but that's the exception. The rule is, Aval Afal became still in all, Bnei Yisrael, by the majority of Yidden, Hareza Inyan Shalom Ma'alam HaSeichel, it's something that's beyond intellect. Gzeirahim Lefonai, it's a decree before me. You have no permission to even think about it, to try to investigate it, etc. So now the Rebbe is going to connect this with the imprisonment of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and his freedom that took place on the 12th of Tammuz, this upcoming week, that is blessed from this Shabbos. This is emphasized the connection with the idea of the imprisonment and the redemption. The entire idea of the Frierdiker Rebbe being imprisoned was in a way that it was a decree before Hashem. Mitzad Tam Vadas, from the perspective of reason and knowledge, ein mokum klal in meiser. There is no room whatsoever for imprisonment. Shekain keitzad yitochem ligrem tsar v'yisurim gedolim l'tzadik v'nasi Yisrael. How is it possible to cause suffering and pain and affliction, a lot of it, to a tzaddik and a leader of Yidden, yisurim lamata v'yisurim lamayla? Both it was pain down here below and pain above. I guess the Rebbe means in the spiritual worlds, it affects pain, or affected pain for his ancestors. He is Metzayin to L'chutei Diburim for this. There is, though, the explanation that every descent is for the sake of an ascent, but that only helps to someone that is knowledgeable in these things. But for the most simple person, Asher b'shem Yisrael Yichuna that we spoke about before, that he's only called by the name Yisrael. He's only called by the name Jew. He doesn't know of anything else. You can't explain to him a whole idea about Yeridol Tzorech Aliyah. So therefore, how do you explain to him how is it possible that such a great and holy person should be suffering? Not only that, also by those that's possible to understand deep matters of comprehension and explanation. After all the explanations in the topic that every descent is for the sake of an elevation, it's not given to explain and to understand intellectually, rationally, the entire idea of imprisonment. Because even after all the explanations, the question is still asked. How does it make sense to cause such great suffering to a tzaddik and a nasi? Every person understands and knows that it's impossible that pain and suffering should be caused to the most beloved person, the person that he loves the most. Ella, rather, surely we must say, this idea, what occurred with the Frierdiker Rebbe in 1927, is in a way of a chukah. I made a decree that's beyond understanding. It's a decree before me. You have no permission to think about it. Now the Rebbe says, how does this apply in our service today? The explanation of this matter and the lesson in the service of a person today. The idea of chukas in the service of a person to Hashem is an avodah shalamaylam metamvadas, a service that's beyond reason and knowledge. Kabbalas oil mesiras nefesh, accepting and totally submitting oneself to Hashem's will. Keloimar, this means she'ois zois mipnei tzivi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He does this because of Hashem's command. Chukah chakakti gzeir gazarti, I've made a decree. Gzeiri himulfana, it's a decree from before. So now, here is the core that has to do with the Wednesday shir. The intention in this is that not that the person does it against his will. This means as follows. From his intellect perspective, he has questions. When it comes to actuality, he fulfills the command of Hashem. So he's doing it like by force. He's being coerced to do so. I don't understand, but I need to follow Hashem's command. So the Rebbe says that's not what it means. That's not the true idea of chukah in the service of a person to the Eibishter. Rather, it's in such a manner that there are no questions. It's not that he has questions and the questions are there and he disregards it, but he doesn't even approach it with questions. You have no permission to even think about it. The whole idea of questions and answers, do I have questions? Do I have answers? That's not on the table at all. Since he's aware that this is a decree from the Eibishter, he doesn't even begin to think. He doesn't even raise any questions. He realizes that it's not even possible to understand Hashem's mind. And therefore, there's no contradiction whatsoever. That he could serve his service with vitality, with energy, with joy and gladness of heart. And this is the core of what the Rebbe is saying. If a person is doing something because he feels coerced, so the nature of a person when he feels that he's forced to do something is that there's no enjoyment in it. There's no joy in it. There's no passion in it. But if a person is so devoted that he doesn't even ask any questions, so then One can do it with joy, one can do it with energy and vitality and so on. Then the Rebbe adds a very interesting idea. He goes a little bit into depth in an expression of the Chazal over here. We could add to this an idea that people do not pay attention. This quote that Rashi brings down, that you have no permission to think about it in the simple sense, it's a prohibition. This means to say, since it's a decree before me, therefore it's prohibited for you to even begin thinking about it. But the Rebbe is now going to analyze the Rambam in a totally unrelated topic, and he's going to analyze the word rishus. And he's going to say that from the Rambam we see that rishus means capability. And therefore, if according to the Rambam, the word rishus means capability, so when the Chazal said that by the mitzvahs that are in a way of a chukah, it's ein lecha rishus laharachra, it doesn't mean we're prohibited from doing so. We don't even have the capability to think about it. Meaning, we are so devoted to Hashem in our very essential nature that we would not even consider any questions on Hashem. Let's see inside how the Rebbe brings this from a Rambam somewhere else. Rambam from the language of the Rambam. The Rambam says, quote, Rishus l'chol adam nesuna, every person is given the capability, imrotza lahatis atzmo l'derech toiva v'liyasadik, if a person wants to lean and go towards a good way, to be a tzaddik, harishus biyadai, he has the rishus, meaning the capability. If he wants Chas v'shalom the opposite, he has the capability. So what do we see from the Rambam over there? The Rambam uses the expression in Hebrew of rishus concerning choice, free will. So therefore, now if we apply it concerning the idea of chukah, nimtza comes out, the explanation that you have no rishus to think about it. It doesn't just mean that it's prohibited for him to be maharer. Rather, that he doesn't even have, it's not even dependent on his will and his free choice. Since this is not in his capability whatsoever, even if he would want to, he would not be able to challenge and question the decrees of the Eibishter. So the Rebbe goes on to explain this more practically. Kaloima, this means to say, it's a nature of a Yid. When he hears that Hashem commanded so and so, it's not even possible you should think about it. Like we said before, this is not something that he has even free choice about. He wasn't even given the capability and the possibility for this. If he still sees, despite that questions do arise in his thought, we must say this is not because of who he is. He, the Jew himself, is in an unquestioning state. Not only is it not him, this is not even from the perspective of his nefesh habahamis. Rather, it's coming from the Yetzer Hara, which is even lower than nefesh habahamis, and the slavish benefesh habahamis that enclosed itself in his nefesh habahamis. So B'lashon Rambam, like the Rambam says, Yitzra Yehusha Tokvay, his Yetzer Hara overpowered him. This is like he is being coerced to have questions fall into his mind, because the nature of a Yid is not to have any questions. This is the lesson that we derive in the Parsha of the week that we read in the Shabbos prior to the days of the Yemei HaGeula. The general service that's connected with the days of the redemption, which the Rebbe always emphasizes. What do we have to do in connection with Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tam? We have to spread Torah and we have to strengthen Yiddishkeit. Just like the previous Rebbe was arrested because of this, and once he was freed, we see that this is the purpose, this is the goal, this we have to derive from the Frierdiker Rebbe's freedom, that our job is to continue his work in spreading Yiddishkeit. And how does it have to be done? We derive it from this week's Torah portion that has to be in a matter of Chukas. It's a service that's done totally out of complete submission to Hashem's will and desire. And when we completely sublimate ourselves to Hashem, then all obstacles and all things that stand in the way that can come about because of a person's limitations and their boundaries of their mind, they cease to be. Because that he realized that this is a decree of Hashem, therefore, surely you have no even freedom of choice to think about it. Along with this, the avodah is done with vitality, with joy and gladness of heart, because it's really who he is. He's not going against his nature. The person that's forcing themselves to do something, so then they don't feel happy. But if they are doing it because they're being true to their true nature, so then they do it out of joy. Now the Rebbe applies this to, like we said before, Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, the lessons has to be even with those that are only called a Jew, they don't know of anything else. This lesson is applicable to every single Yid, even to the most simplest person that is called Yisrael. When we tell a simple Jew, since Hashem commanded to do such and such, therefore it's incumbent upon him to do so, even if the matter is not understood with him intellectually. So then, then there is no particular difficulty to affect by the person to do things that are contrary to intellect. Once you tell them that this is something that Hashem commanded, he realizes that intellect and Hashem don't work together. He knows and understands simply. It's not within his capability to understand and grasp the mind of Hashem. How much more so from the fact that he's incapable of understanding and comprehending the intellect of a great sage, of a wise person. Nobody would think that they can understand, I don't know, whatever, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, Albert Einstein. So if you can't even understand human intellect, how much more so would it be impossible to understand the Eibush? Amnam u Yehudi Pasha Shevepshutim. Though he's a very simple Yid, but actually let's skip over to the next paragraph, to the last three lines of the next paragraph. Ein kol pele b'kach. There's no wonder in the fact by this simple person, you have no permission, or even more so, you have no even choice to even think about it. It's impossible, it makes no sense that human intellect, the intellect of flesh and blood, should be able to comprehend and understand the intellect of the Hashem. Adrab, just the opposite. If I would be able to understand Hashem's mind, it would be a wonder. In other words, the fact that we don't understand Hashem, that is a given. Any time that we try to propose that we should be able to understand Hashem, is that a God that you would call a God if you could understand him? In what way then is he God? Then he's he's your friend. Therefore, though from the perspective of intellect, from the mind's view, there could be a question could come up. For example, knowing that he finds himself in the double and quadruple darkness of the time of exile. Especially since he doesn't need any proof for this. He knows this from his own personal state, that he's in a state where he's only called a Jew. He doesn't know anything else. So a question can arise. How can a person do his service in such a state if he has no other connection with Hashem, just that he's called a Jew? But still, since his avoid is in the way of Chukas, that is a decree. A service in such a way where he's completely devoted and completely sublimated to Hashem. Then all the different types of obstacles that could come about from the perspective of intellect ceases. That you have no permission to be able to think about this. Let's skip over a little bit. Let's skip over to the third paragraph on the next page. A simple person, not someone that has all types of deep intellectual thoughts, that he's only called by the name Yisrael, because he doesn't have the problem of what he spoke about, the part that we skipped. Etzloi a mitzvah, the para aduma, the misuga mitzvahs, the Chukim she'ein aleim tam v'hezber sichli. By him, the mitzvah of para aduma is from the category of mitzvahs of Chukim that there is no logical explanation. It's a decree, you do not have any permission to think about it. In the simple meaning of it. And in general, being that he's the most simple, he's of the most simple people. It doesn't apply by him so much, this understanding and comprehension intellectually. It's easier to affect by him that his service should be in a way of chukas, a service out of sublimating himself and totally devoting himself to Hashem's will. As it's known, the story about one of the Chassidim of the Tzemach Tzedek. When he came into the Tzemach Tzedek for Yechidus, he was like laying his heart bare before the Tzemach Tzedek, and he said, Ki eine chafetz lilmoid, es will sich nicht lernen. He doesn't desire to learn. And Tzemach Tzedek responded, Kasher ein chafetzim lilmoid zer is a toy. If you don't desire, if you don't want to learn, that's good. Because then the avoida of bending one's will and sublimating themselves, because he's bending his will to go ahead and study. What should I do? The Tzemach Tzedek continued. I do want to learn. I do want to study Torah. It's not in a way that I'm serving Hashem. I'm doing it out of enjoyment. So the Tzemach Tzedek was saying, like, you're in a better place than I am because you can do it out of service to Hashem. So too in our topic, by the most simple person, it's easier to affect by him that a service should be in a way of sublimating his will to Hashem in a way of a decree. So too concerning the service of doing it with joy. By him, it will not contradict this avoida of doing it out of joy. And then he says, Masher Eitzel Maskul Gadol, than a great brain. Eitzel Maskul Gadol, by a great thinker. The idea that you have no permission to think after it and to investigate it and so on. He has to do that in the way of a decree. Because this big maskul, this big brain, he is all about understanding and comprehending it. Since that is the case, there's a need for special effort to be put in to cause that that he should be able to do things in a super rational manner, in a way that he's accepting Hashem's decree. He needs to find all different types of ways how it should not stand in the way to his serving Hashem out of joy. But if my approach to serving Hashem is like a simple person, I don't feel that I need to understand everything. I don't feel that my life revolves around understanding and intellect. If I don't feel that my connection to Hashem is based on intellect, if I go with the initial preconceived notion that Hashem is beyond the whole idea of intellect, and connecting with Hashem is not based on intellect, so my lack of understanding does not in any way detract from my joy. It's not in a way of a decree that he has to not understand. In other words, that he has to not understand makes sense. By the person that wants to understand everything, when you tell him there are certain things you're not going to understand, he has to take it to Kabul soil. He has to take it as a decree. But by a simple person, he realizes initially, he doesn't have to understand. He understands intellectually that's impossible. It makes no sense that you should understand Hashem's mind. Therefore, you have no even possibility and freedom of choice to think about it. Therefore, there's no contradiction whatsoever to a service with joy and gladness of heart. So this is the message that the Rebbe is telling us in the Sicha, that there's an expression that's brought down called the Poshet mild faith. The simpler our approach, the less intellectualized we do everything, the more joy we are able to approach things with, because we realize we're not meant to understand everything. If we realize we're not meant to understand, and really in truth that our connection with Hashem cannot be based on understanding, then the fact that we don't understand doesn't undermine our enjoyment, and it doesn't undermine our joy, and we are happy and enjoying the fact that we are able to serve Hashem, regardless of the fact that there's such a great distance between me and Hashem that it's impossible for me to understand. We'll stop over here.